I'm going to show you guys how to make a rain stick. It's a lot of little steps, but we'll get them all done. Okay, so your first step that you're going to make is you're going to make a whole bunch of little beads. So all you're going to do is take a little pinch of clay, you're going to roll it between your thumb and your fingers, and you make a whole bunch of little beads. And what you're going to do is you need between 50 and 100 of them, so you need a lot. So this takes a long time. So you're going to keep rolling them between your finger, and you're going to make a whole bunch of them. Then what you're going to do is make a little pouch for them so they don't roll all over your back. So you're going to take a piece of paper towel, you're going to fold it 3/4 of the way up, so there's a little seam, and then you're going to staple the edges with a stapler. And this will hold all your beads so they don't roll everywhere and make a mess. So then you're going to pour all your little beads in your little pouch so that they can dry out. The idea is for your beads to get bone dry before you put them in your rain stick. So they have to be completely dry. So if they dry out, it's perfect. So don't worry about trying to keep them wet and that they need to stay soft. So you're going to make a whole bunch of your little beads, and I already made a little pouch here. And I have a whole bunch of my little beads sitting in there, and they're pretty dry. Okay? So you're going to put those aside and worry about that at the end. So after you make all your little beads, you have to make about 20 to 40 spikes. So what you need to do is take a little bit of clay, and you're just going to roll out a little quill, like a little snake, but not too long. And you just make it pointed at the end. So you're just going to press a little bit firmer on the end, and then you're going to set them off to the side. You want your spikes to get leather hard, not bone dry. Your pebbles are bone dry, but your spikes need to stay leather hard. They can't be completely dried out because you're going to have to attach them to your sphere. So I'm going to keep making some more spikes until I have the right amount. All I do is cut off the extra clay so you have a nice even spike. Again, try to vary the sizes and the thicknesses so you have different variations, because the spikes will end up giving you a different tone if you have different variations of thick and thin. They're all exactly the same, it's going to be kind of a boring sound in your rain stick. After you do that, then you have to get your extruded tube. So when you have all your spikes done and all your pebbles, then you need to come see myself or Mr. Hitter, whoever your teacher is. And you're going to get your tube. And your tube has been extruded out through a machine, and I'll show you what the machine looks like. It's outside, but it makes hollow forms. So it'll actually make it perfectly round on the inside, but it's hollow. What you need to do with your tube is to even out the height on both ends so you have a nice flush surface. So I'll just use my needle tool and just kind of guide it over and trim it up to make sure my lip on both sides is as even as possible. So I'm just going to clean up my edge and make sure it's nice and neat, and then I'll come down here. Now some of them will be curved. If you don't want yours too curved, you can cut off a bigger chunk. I'm just going to cut this off about here to even it out. So I'll use my needle tool, because for my design the curve would be interesting. So then you'll just cut it out and clean it up. So you have to close this up at the end, and you don't want to have a rough edge. That's why we clean it out. Then I'll clean up all my little burrs and all my jagged edges. And then I'm ready to proceed on to the next step. I would go ahead and slightly smooth out if you have big dents or any bumps in your piece. Take a rib tool real quick and just smooth out any rough spots that might be in your tube, just from it being extruded out of the machine. Sometimes it has bumps in it. Now you're ready to put your spikes in, because your spikes have set up and they're leather hard. You have to wait for your spikes to be leather hard. If they're still soft and pliable, you won't be able to use it. So find the ones that are leather hard, and I have a few that are leather hard. What you're going to do is make a small hole, and what you'll do is use your carving tool, and you'll use the knife inside, and you're just going to spiral it in, and then you'll use the little carving side and make your width. You want the width of your spiked holes a little bit smaller than the base of your spike, because you want it to fit in there nice and tight. You don't want it to be wiggly. It wants to fit in there just right. So I'm going to go in and carve this out. I'm going to check to make sure my spike fits in there, and I'm going to push it in almost to where it gets stuck. So you want to make sure it fits. So you're going to have some of it exposed that you're going to cut off. Then what you need to do is take your needle tool, and you're going to go ahead and score, because you can't use the scoring rib or the serrated rib to score the sides. So you need to go ahead and score all the way around on the inside. I'll go ahead and score this one for you. And then you're going to score the whole length of your little spike here that's going to touch once you put it in there. So I know it's going to go about that far, so I'm going to score with my needle tool. You can use your rib for this, the serrated rib. It goes a little faster. I'm going to keep scoring my spike. And then I'm going to add slip. So I'm going to put slip around the edge of my spike. Oops. And then we're going to drop it in there. You're going to push it in very carefully. Wipe your slip excess off, and then you're going to cut your spike so it's flush to your tube. So all I'm going to do is hold the back side of my spike, and I'm going to carefully use my cutting tool and carve out the extra spike, and then I'm going to blend the spikes over with my rib so it sits flush and there's no dip, and then you'll see your spike on the inside right there. So your spikes will be in there. When you're arranging your spikes, if you think of them like a ladder, so they'll crisscross and they keep going up and above, you get a better sound. If you spiral them around, so you'll take your holes, and you'll have a hole here, and then you start stair-stepping it around, kind of like a corkscrew staircase, you'll get a better sound because the beads will roll off all of those little spikes that you put in here. So you have to get all your spikes put in before you can put your beads. So what I'll be working on next is just continuing to make holes, spiraling around, and I just take my knife tool or cutting tool, and I cut out a hole, use my carving tool, and I'll go ahead and clean it out. I'll take a spike, I'll score it with a rib, with the serrated rib, and then I'll go in with my needle tool and I'll score the edge of my tube. I'll add slip. Remember to dab your slip so it doesn't rub out your score marks. I'll wedge my spike inside my tube carefully, just so there's no friction anymore. Wipe that off. Take my cutting tool, support the spike as you cut. Cut it as close to flush as possible. You use your rib tool and rub out your spikes. Okay. Once you get all your spikes put in, then you're ready to put your base on. So what you'll have to do is make a base for each end. So while I'm waiting on to finish putting my spikes in, I'm going to show you how to do that next. So you're going to take a chunk of clay, and what you're going to do is try to flatten it out as much as possible first. Just want to flatten it out until like a pancake. Take my rolling pin, and I'm going to gently roll. My goal is to try to get about a 1/4 inch thick and as even as possible, so it's not too thick. I'm going to roll out my clay, and this is enough to make a couple of these. Okay, so as even as possible. I'm going to take my tube, I'm going to match my tube's outer edge, and I'm just going to take a pen tool, trace around the edge first just to get a line established. Take this off. And all I'm going to do with the cutting tool is cut out my circle with clay. And I'll cut away my excess and lift up my little slab. And I have my slab for my ends, so it'll fit. Okay? When your little ends get leather hard, but you want to make sure you clean them up, make sure they're smooth and pretty, look a little nicer like this one, then you're ready to attach them onto your tube. You'll have to use the serrated rib, and you're going to need to score the edge of your tube. Score the edge that's touching the tube, your outer edge. You're going to add slip to both ends. So I'm going to dab my slip on here. It's a little messy. Dab my slip onto my tube. Trying to attach. Remember, when you attach properly, you should have a little bit of slip oozage. If you don't have any slip oozing out, you can put enough slip. Some of you forgot to do that on your projects. That's why pieces fall off. Then you're going to take the curved end of your blending tool, your wood tool, and you're just going to go around the edges and you're going to blend in that slab that you've just attached onto your tube, all the way around the circumference of your tube. After you score and slip your base on there, you want to use your rig tool and smooth out so this doesn't have any divots in it. And you want to smooth around your edge so it's all nice and clean and it matches the diameter of your tube. Then, before you put your last piece to close this up, you need to take your beads that have been drying for the last few days while you're working on your project, and you need to carefully pour them into your tube without making a mess. Okay? All your little beads will sit inside your tube. Then you will score and slip and put this last piece on so it looks just like this piece. And then as you rock back and forth, you'll be able to hear your beads inside your tube. And then eventually as it dries, you'll hear them more and more. When you fire them, that's when it gets the perfect sound. So you won't really hear the perfect sound until after we fire them. But when they get really hard leather hard, they'll work out well. And then next to you, then after you get that part done, and then it's all your decoration.